When security grabbed my badge, VP Deirdre Moss was already installing her niece at my workstation. I pulled out my phone and typed 9 words to the CEU. What happened in the next 8 minutes turned a firing into a federal investigation. The morning I got fired, I arrived at work 17 minutes early. That was my habit. 23 years of showing up before anyone else, checking systems that no one understood except me, making sure the digital heartbeat of this company kept pumping. I swiped my badge at 6:58 a.m. The turnstile clicked green. Oscar Vang sat behind the security desk in the glass atrium, his eyes fixed on a clipboard. He didn't look up. That was unusual. Oscar always looked up. We had a routine, a nod, sometimes a comment about the weather or last night's game. Today, nothing. His jaw was tight, his pen scratching against paper he wasn't really reading. I noticed the way his shoulders hunched forward, like a man carrying a weight he couldn't put down. I felt the first cold finger of unease trace down my spine. The elevator deposited me on the 4th floor. The open-plan office was empty at this hour. Rows of ergonomic chairs pushed into desks like sleeping soldiers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sterile glow across the gray carpet. I walked to my workstation in the corner, the one with 3 monitors arranged in a precise arc. I had cable-managed every wire myself, zip-tied and labeled with the meticulous attention of a man who believed in order. My wife Ruth used to joke that my desk looked like mission control. Something was wrong. My family photo had been moved. It usually sat at a 45-degree angle to my primary monitor, positioned so I could glance at Ruth's face during long debugging sessions. Now it was pushed to the edge of the desk, nearly falling off. The frame was crooked. Someone had touched it. Someone had been here. And my monitors were dark. All 3 of them. Logged out. I never logged out. In 23 years, I had never once logged out of my workstation. The system I maintained required constant monitoring. It was the nervous system of the entire logistics operation, the thing that kept trucks moving and warehouses humming and customers satisfied. Leaving it unattended was like walking away from a patient on life support. My phone buzzed. A message from Deirdre Moss's assistant. Please report to Ms. Moss's office immediately. The cold finger became a fist. I touched the family photo, straightening it. Ruth smiled up at me from behind the glass, frozen in a moment from our anniversary trip to Maine 3 years ago. She was wearing the blue sweater I loved, standing on the rocky shore with the lighthouse behind her. I had taken that photo the day after she finished her last round of chemotherapy, the day we celebrated her survival. I pocketed my personal USB drive. Old habit. Always have a backup. Then I walked toward the corner office where Deirdre Moss had been my supervisor for 2 years, ever since she leapfrogged over me for the VP position I had spent a decade preparing for. Her door was open. She was already seated behind her desk, a slab of glass and chrome that cost more than my first car. She didn't stand when I entered. She didn't smile. The morning light from the window behind her cast her face in shadow. "Close the door, Ellison," she said. I closed it. The click of the latch sounded final. "Sit." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I sat in the chair across from her. It was deliberately lower than her chair, a power play I had noticed the first time I sat in it. The fabric was stiff and uncomfortable. Deirdre was 49, with the kind of sharp features that looked expensive. Her hair was pulled back tight, her makeup flawless. Her nails painted a deep crimson that matched her lipstick. She wore a navy blazer with gold buttons that caught the light. On her desk was a single sheet of paper and a nameplate I hadn't seen before. It was positioned in the corner, half hidden by a stack of folders. But I saw it. The brass plate gleamed. Cressida Moss Harlan. Technical lead. My stomach dropped. "We're making some changes," Deirdre began. Her voice was rehearsed, each word placed like a chess piece moving toward checkmate. "Organizational realignment. The board has determined that the pace of innovation requires fresh perspectives, new energy, a different approach to the challenges we face in the modern marketplace." I said nothing. I had learned long ago that silence was a weapon. Let them fill the void. Let them reveal themselves. "Your skill set," she continued, not meeting my eyes, "no longer aligns with our strategic direction. We appreciate your years of service, your dedication, your institutional knowledge, but effective immediately, your position has been eliminated." She slid the single sheet of paper across the desk. I looked at it. Termination notice. My name typed neatly at the top, the font cold and impersonal. No severance details, no explanation beyond reorganization, no acknowledgement of 23 years of perfect performance reviews. "Where's the documentation?" I asked. My voice was calm. 23 years had taught me how to keep the tremor out, how to swallow the rage and the fear and let only the professional remain. Deirdre's eyes flickered. Just for a moment, something passed across her face. Uncertainty, maybe. Or guilt. This is the documentation. This is a single page. No performance reviews, no prior warnings, no severance package outlined. HR procedure requires a formal review process, a performance improvement plan, documentation of any issues. I've read the employee handbook, Ms. Moss. I helped write parts of it. HR has signed off. She cut me off, her tone hardening like concrete setting. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to collect personal items. Any company property, including your laptop and access credentials, must be surrendered immediately. I looked at the nameplate again, Cressida Moss Harlan. The name rang a bell. Deirdre's niece. I had heard whispers in the break room over the past few weeks, rumors about a new hire with family connections and questionable credentials. Someone had mentioned seeing her touring the server room with Deirdre. Someone else had mentioned the fancy new business cards that had been ordered. "Who is Cressida?" I asked. Deirdre's face went blank. A professional mask, smooth and impenetrable. "That's not relevant to this conversation." "It seems relevant. Her nameplate is on your desk. My position is being eliminated. The math isn't difficult." "This meeting is over, Ellison." She pressed a button on her phone. "Security is on their way." I stood. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I had been in enough rooms with enough executives to know when the decision was already made, when the script had been written, and the actors were just reading their lines. But I memorized the nameplate. I memorized the way Deirdre's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. I memorized the slight bulge under the folder stack where other documents were hidden. A knock on the door. Oscar Vang stepped inside, his face apologetic, his eyes not quite meeting mine. He was holding a cardboard box. The standard issue termination box, brown and plain. "Mr. Cade," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I've been asked to escort you." I nodded. We walked together back to my workstation, our footsteps echoing in the empty office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I began collecting the few personal items I kept there. The photo of Ruth, a coffee mug from our anniversary trip to Maine, the one with the lighthouse painted on the side, a stress ball shaped like a server that Leo, the boy I mentored at the youth center, had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. And then I saw her. A young woman was sitting at my desk, at my workstation, at the chair I had occupied for 2 decades. She had blonde hair pulled into a messy bun and nervous eyes that darted around the monitors like a bird in a cage. She was clicking through my system dashboards with the frantic energy of someone who had no idea what they were looking at. Cressida Moss Harlan. She glanced up at me, then quickly looked away. Her cheeks flushed pink. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't apologize for sitting in a chair that was still warm from 2 decades of my labor. She just kept clicking, her mouse movements erratic, her face increasingly pale as error messages began to populate the screens. Oscar took my badge. His fingers brushed mine as he did it, and he leaned close. His breath was warm against my ear. "This wasn't my call," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Eli. I tried to tell them." We walked toward the elevator. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't look back at the woman dismantling my life's work with clumsy fingers. I didn't look at the office I had practically lived in for 23 years. I didn't look at the server room door, behind which hummed the systems I had built and nurtured and protected. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, keeping my movements casual. An automated alert from the monitoring system I had built 15 years ago. The system that kept the company's entire logistics network running. The system that required a daily manual authentication that only I knew how to perform. Failsafe handshake missed. System integrity. Window, 8 minutes. I stopped walking. Oscar stopped beside me. "Mr. Cade?" I looked at my phone. I looked at the elevator. I thought about Ruth, waiting at home, probably already making coffee, not knowing her husband was being thrown away like a broken tool. I thought about the 23 years I had given this company. I thought about the systems I had built, the problems I had solved, the late nights and early mornings and missed dinners. Then I typed a text message. 9 words. I sent it to Warren Teague, the CEO, the man who had hired me 23 years ago, the man who had barely spoken to me since the board expanded and the company grew beyond his direct control. System freezes in 8 minutes. Cressida doesn't know the handshake. Check floor 4. I hit send. Oscar shifted uncomfortably. "We should keep moving, Mr. Cade. I have instructions." I nodded. We stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close. My phone buzzed. Warren Teague's reply. "Stay right there. Do not leave the building. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. We were in the lobby, the glass atrium glittering in the morning light. The turnstiles gleamed like teeth. The company logo was etched into the marble floor, a reminder of everything I had helped build. And then I heard it. The private elevator behind the security desk, the one that went directly to the executive floor, the one that only C-suite executives could access. It dinged. The doors slid open. Warren Teague stepped out. He was 63, silver-haired, with the weathered face of a man who had built something from nothing and watched others try to tear it apart. His suit was rumpled, like he had thrown it on in a hurry. His tie was askew. He looked at Oscar. He looked at me. Then he looked past us, toward the elevator that would take him to the 4th floor. "Stay here," he said to me. His voice was granite. He walked past us. He got into the elevator. The doors closed. Oscar and I stood in silence. The clock on the wall ticked. 7 minutes. 6. The lobby was still empty, the morning shift not yet arrived. Through the glass walls, I could see the city waking up, cars streaming past, people hurrying to their own offices, their own lives. I heard shouting from somewhere above us, muffled, distant, a woman's voice high and defensive, a man's voice, low and furious. Then nothing. 5 minutes. 4. The elevator dinged again. Warren Teague emerged. Behind him was Deirdre Moss, her face the color of chalk, her crimson lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her was Cressida, crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. Warren walked directly to me. He stopped 2 feet away. His eyes were sharp, searching my face like he was reading a document. "Explain," he said. 1 word, a command, and so I did. Ruth handed me a cup of coffee without saying a word. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around her own mug, and she waited. That was Ruth. 27 years of marriage had taught her when to speak and when to let the silence do the work. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the tablecloth she had bought for our anniversary last year. I told her everything. The firing, the nameplate, Cressida at my desk, the text to Warren, the 8 minutes that changed everything. I told her about Oscar's whispered apology, about Deirdre's rehearsed speech, about the way the monitors had been logged out as if someone had already erased me from the system before I even arrived. When I finished, she nodded slowly. Her face was calm, but I could see the storm behind her eyes. She had weathered too many storms with me to panic now. What happens now? I didn't have an answer. The chaos at the office had been controlled, but not resolved. Warren had demanded explanations from Deirdre in the lobby, his voice carrying through the glass atrium with an authority I hadn't heard from him in years. Deirdre had deflected, stammered, pointed fingers at everyone except herself. The system had frozen for exactly 47 seconds before I walked back to my workstation, pushed Cressida aside, and performed the manual handshake that only I knew existed. The logistics network came back online. Trucks started moving across the country. Orders processed. Warehouses hummed back to life. Crisis averted. But I wasn't reinstated. I was sent home. Administrative leave, Warren called it, his eyes not quite meeting mine, pending investigation. Deirdre was still VP. Cressida was still sitting at my desk, probably still clicking through dashboards she didn't understand. And I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee, wondering how 23 years of loyalty could be erased in 15 minutes. "You need to document everything," Ruth said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm, strong. They were the same fingers that had gripped mine through chemotherapy sessions, through late-night hospital vigils, through every crisis our family had faced. Everything they did, everything they said, start a file. She was right. She was always right. I went to my workshop. It used to be our garage before I converted it into a sanctuary of labeled bins and organized shelves. The concrete floor was clean, swept weekly. The workbench was spotless, tools hanging on a pegboard in precise order. On the wall were my service awards, framed and dusty. 20 years of excellence, 15 years of dedication, a plaque for the logistics system upgrade that saved the company $3 million in 2017. Meaningless now. I opened my laptop. I created a new document. I titled it Discrepancies. Then I started typing. The memories came flooding back as I wrote. Not just today, but 5 years ago. Ruth in the hospital ICU, her body ravaged by cancer, the treatments that nearly killed her before they saved her, the fluorescent lights, the beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic and fear. I had taken unpaid leave to be by her side, sleeping in a chair beside her bed for 6 weeks. The company had almost fired me then. Almost. Lumen Reyes had saved me. She was the in-house employment attorney, young then, new to the company, fresh out of law school with idealistic eyes and a fierce determination to do the right thing. She had found the loophole in my contract, the clause that protected extended medical leave for family emergencies. She had gone to bat for me when no one else would. She had stood in front of the VP of HR and cited case law from memory until they backed down. I had barely known her, but she had fought like I was family. I owed her. I picked up my phone. I sent her a text. "Can we talk off campus?" Her reply came 20 minutes later. An address. A 24-hour diner on Route 9. Tonight, 8 p.m. I spent the afternoon writing. Timeline, names, dates, every conversation I could remember, every word Deirdre had spoken, every email I had saved to my personal drive over the years, every anomaly I had noticed in the weeks before my termination. The moved photo, the logged-out monitors, Oscar's strange silence, the way Deirdre's assistant had avoided my eyes for days before the firing, like she knew something was coming. At 7:45 p.m., I drove to the diner. The parking lot was half empty, pickup trucks and sedans scattered under the orange glow of sodium lights. The neon sign flickered in the evening mist, one letter buzzing and dark. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried food and the quiet desperation of people who had nowhere else to be. Lumen was already there, sitting in a vinyl booth in the back corner. She was 37 now, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail and glasses that made her look older than she was. The years had added lines around her eyes, but the fierce intelligence in her gaze hadn't dimmed. She had a folder on the table in front of her, thick with papers. I slid into the booth across from her. The vinyl creaked under my weight. "Thank you for meeting me." She didn't smile. "I didn't do it for you." She pushed the folder across the table, the papers rustling against the Formica surface. "I did it because what they're doing is wrong." I opened the folder. Inside were copies. Dozens of them. HR complaints filed against Deirdre Moss over 18 months. Internal memos that had been marked confidential and then buried. Performance reviews that had been altered after the fact. Original versions crossed out and replaced with harsher language. Disciplinary actions that had been buried without investigation. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been collecting them for 2 years," Lumen said quietly. She glanced toward the door, a habitual check for anyone who might be listening. Every complaint that came across my desk about her, I made a copy. Every document that mysteriously disappeared from the system, I saved the original to a personal drive. I looked at her. "Why?" "Because you saved my job once, Eli." She met my eyes, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Gratitude, loyalty, the kind of debt that never expires. In 2019, during the layoffs, they wanted to cut legal staff. 3 attorneys were on the chopping block. I was the most junior. I remembered, vaguely. There had been a meeting with Warren. I had argued that cutting legal would expose the company to liability, that we needed competent attorneys, not yes-men who rubber-stamped whatever HR wanted. I hadn't known Lumen's name then. I had just known it was wrong. "You went to Warren," she continued. "You told him the company needed competent attorneys, not yes-men who rubber-stamped whatever HR wanted. You didn't even know me, but you fought for me. You fought for all of us." It seemed like the right thing to do. It was. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "And now it's my turn to do the right thing. I pay my debts, Eli. Always have." I flipped through the documents. One caught my eye. A complaint dated 6 months ago. The subject line made my blood run cold. Nepotism. Falsified credentials. Cressida Moss Harlan. "Someone filed a complaint about Cressida before she was even officially hired," I said. Lumen nodded. "Look at the complainant." The name was redacted. Black marker over the signature, thick and deliberate, but there was an employee ID number at the bottom, partially visible. I recognized the prefix. It was from security. "Oscar Vang," I said. Lumen didn't confirm or deny. She just looked at me with those steady eyes, letting me draw my own conclusions. I closed the folder. What do I do with this? Document everything. Build your case. They're going to try to bury you, Eli. They're going to say you sabotaged the system. They're going to paint you as a disgruntled employee who went rogue, a bitter old man who couldn't accept being replaced. You need proof that you're the victim here, not the villain. I nodded. I put the folder in my jacket, feeling its weight against my chest. I stood to leave. "Eli," Lumen said. I turned. Her face was serious, worried. "Be careful. Deirdre has connections. She knows people on the board. She's not going to let you win without a fight." I thought about the nameplate on her desk. Cressida Moss Harlan, technical lead. a position that hadn't existed until I was fired, a person who couldn't perform the basic functions of the job she supposedly earned, a niece installed in a position she hadn't earned, protected by an aunt who would burn the company down before admitting she was wrong. Neither am I said. I drove home through rain-slicked streets. The city lights blurred in the mist, streaking across my windshield like tears. The radio played soft jazz, but I didn't hear it. My mind was racing through the documents, the connections, the patterns that were beginning to emerge. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a car parked across the street. Engine running, no plates. I sat in my car and watched it for 5 minutes. It didn't move. Whoever was inside didn't get out. The windows were tinted dark, impossible to see through, but I could feel eyes on me, the prickling sensation of being observed. I went into the house. Ruth was already asleep, her breathing soft and steady in the darkness of our bedroom. I didn't wake her. She needed her rest. Her body was still recovering, still fighting, even if the cancer was gone. I sat by the window in the dark, watching the car, watching the watchers. The streetlight cast long shadows across the lawn, and the car sat there, a dark shape in the darkness, patient and silent. At 2:17 a.m., the car drove away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Lumen's folder spread out in front of me, reading every document, memorizing every detail. By dawn, I had a timeline. I had names. I had the beginnings of a pattern. And I had a plan. The county clerk's office smelled like old paper and institutional neglect. I stood at the counter, waiting for a clerk who moved with the deliberate slowness of someone counting down the hours until retirement. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. A water stain spread across the ceiling tiles like a map of some forgotten continent. Harlan Technical Consulting, LLC, I repeated for the third time. I need incorporation records. The clerk sighed. She was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a cardigan that had seen better decades. She typed something into her computer with 2 fingers, hunting and pecking like a bird searching for seeds. Nothing, she said finally. Nothing? No active registration, no current filing. She squinted at her screen, her face wrinkling in concentration. Wait, there's a dissolved entity. Same name. Let me pull the archive. She disappeared into a back room, her footsteps fading into the maze of filing cabinets and forgotten records. I waited. The fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous song. A fly buzzed against the window, trapped between the glass and a yellowed shade that hadn't been raised in years. I thought about Cressida Moss Harlan, the woman who had been sitting at my desk, clicking through dashboards she didn't understand, wearing a title she hadn't earned. Technical lead. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. The clerk returned with a thin folder, holding it like it might bite her. Here. Harlan Technical Consulting, LLC. Registered 6 months ago. Dissolved 5 months ago. I opened the folder. The paperwork was minimal. A certificate of formation dated 1 week before Cressida was hired. A certificate of dissolution dated 1 week after. The registered agent was a law office I didn't recognize. The business address was a P.O. box in Delaware, a shell company, created specifically to fabricate her employment history, built to make her look qualified for a job she couldn't perform, destroyed the moment it served its purpose. I photographed every page with my phone, date stamps, signatures, the registered agent's address, the filing fees, all of it. Each photograph was a brick in the wall I was building. Can I get certified copies? I asked. The clerk looked at me like I had asked for a kidney, but she made the copies. Slowly, deliberately. Each page fed through the ancient copy machine with a mechanical groan that echoed through the empty office. While I waited, my phone buzzed. A text from Lumen. My hands went cold as I read it. They're moving fast. Deirdre filed a memo this morning claiming you installed unauthorized code as a termination trigger. She's backdating it to January. I felt cold. Not surprised. Cold. The kind of cold that settles into your bones when you realize the people you trusted are capable of anything. I picked up the certified copies. I drove home through streets that seemed grayer than usual, the city pressing down on me like a weight. I scanned everything into my laptop. I emailed copies to 3 different accounts. I saved them to an encrypted cloud drive. I printed physical copies and locked them in the fireproof safe Ruth had insisted we buy years ago. Then I called Lumen. The memo, I said. Can you get me a copy? Already have it. Her voice was tight, controlled. The timestamp is wrong. The metadata shows it was created yesterday at 4:47 p.m., but it's dated January 15th. Can you prove that? I can, but they'll say I tampered with it. They'll say I'm biased because of our relationship. What relationship? I barely know you. That's not what they'll say, Eli. She paused. In corporate warfare, truth is irrelevant. Only narrative matters. They're building a story where you're the villain. Every piece of evidence we have, they'll try to spin as fabrication or conspiracy. I understood. I had seen it before, in smaller ways. The way credit for successful projects migrated upward while blame for failures rolled downhill. The way certain people were protected and others were expendable. I had just never been the expendable one until now. What about Oscar? I asked. He filed the original complaint about Cressida. He might be willing to talk. Oh, don't approach him directly, Lumen warned. If Deirdre finds out you're reaching out to current employees, she'll use it as evidence of conspiracy. Witness tampering, obstruction. She'll twist it into something ugly. You need to be careful. I hung up. I sat in my workshop, staring at the wall of framed awards. Employee of the Year, 2015. Distinguished Service, 2018. A plaque commemorating the logistics system upgrade that had saved the company millions. A lifetime of dedication, reduced to paper and glass and dust. The mail slot in the front door clattered. Ruth called out from the kitchen. Eli, something came for you. I walked to the foyer. Ruth was holding an envelope. No return address, no postmark, hand-delivered. The paper was thick, expensive. Someone had taken care with this. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Deirdre Moss and Cressida Moss Harlan at what looked like a family barbecue. They were standing together in a backyard somewhere, arms around each other, laughing at some private joke. Deirdre wore a casual sundress. Cressida held a glass of wine. Behind them, a grill smoked, and children ran across manicured grass. The photo was dated 3 years ago, a timestamp in the corner, digital and precise. There was a post-it note stuck to the image, handwritten in blocky masculine letters. 5 words that changed everything. She's not just a niece. Check the trust. I stared at the note. The handwriting was deliberate, careful. Someone who was used to filling out reports, writing in capital letters. Someone methodical. Oscar. It had to be Oscar. The man who had apologized while escorting me out. The man who had filed the complaint that got buried. The man who saw everything from behind his security desk and said nothing because silence was safer. I showed Ruth. She read the note 3 times, her face growing more serious with each pass. Her fingers traced the edge of the photograph like she was reading Braille. What trust? She asked. I didn't know, but I was going to find out. That evening, a letter arrived by certified mail. Official letterhead from the company's legal department. Heavy paper stock with embossed logos. Cease all contact with current employees. Violation will result in legal action. Ruth read it over my shoulder. I could feel her breath warm against my neck, steady and calm. They're scared, she said. I took the letter to my workshop. I found an empty frame on the wall, one that had held an award I had thrown away in a moment of anger years ago. I put the cease and desist letter inside it and hung it up, right next to my distinguished service plaque. Ruth stood in the doorway, watching me. For the first time in days, she laughed. It was a small sound, but it filled the workshop like sunlight. What are you doing? She asked. Keeping score, I said. That night, I dreamed about the ICU waiting room. The smell of antiseptic and fear. The hum of machines keeping Ruth alive while I sat beside her, helpless. The fluorescent lights that never dimmed, the coffee that tasted like ash. Her hand in mine, both of us pretending to be strong while the world crumbled around us. The doctor's face when he told us the cancer was gone, the way Ruth had cried and I had held her and promised her everything would be okay. I had promised her then that I would never let anyone push me out without a fight. I had promised that I would always protect what mattered. I meant to keep that promise. When I woke up, there was another envelope under my door. Same blocky handwriting, same expensive paper. Inside was a document, thick and legal and covered in dense paragraphs of text. A trust agreement. The Moss Family Trust. Established 15 years ago. I read through it slowly, carefully, the way I read code, looking for the bugs, looking for the vulnerabilities, and there, on page 7, was a name I recognized, Cressida Moss Harlan, beneficiary, 12% ownership of company stock, undisclosed in any SEC filing. I read the page 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My hands were shaking by the third read. 12%. She wasn't just Deirdre's niece. She was a hidden stakeholder in the company. Her appointment as technical lead wasn't just nepotism, it was securities fraud. A publicly traded company, hiding a significant ownership stake from shareholders and regulators. A federal violation with teeth. The implications cascaded through my mind like dominoes falling. If this was real, if I could prove it, this wasn't just wrongful termination anymore. This was criminal. This was prison time. I called Lumen. I need to meet, I said. Now. Warren Teague's penthouse office occupied the entire 22nd floor of the corporate tower. I had been there exactly twice in 23 years. Once when I was hired, a nervous young man in an ill-fitting suit shaking the hand of a legend. Once when Ruth got sick and I needed time off, standing in front of Warren's desk with tears in my eyes, begging for understanding. Now I stood in the lobby of the building, holding a letter I had hand-delivered by courier that morning. A formal request for a private meeting regarding fiduciary irregularities observed before my departure. Legal language, precise language, the kind of language that makes corporate lawyers sweat. Warren's assistant called me back within the hour. Her voice was professionally neutral, carefully modulated to reveal nothing. "Mr. Teague will see you," she said, "tomorrow at 9 a.m. However, Ms. Moss has requested to be present for any discussions regarding company matters." I felt my jaw tighten. Of course Deirdre would try to insert herself. She needed to control the narrative. She needed to spin whatever I might say before Warren could hear it unfiltered. "I'll wait until Mr. Teague is available privately," I said. My voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "My concerns are of a sensitive nature. They require discretion." Silence on the line. I could almost hear her calculating, weighing the options. Then, "I'll relay that to Mr. Teague." I hung up. I knew Deirdre would hear about this within minutes. I knew she would try to spin it, to paint me as paranoid, as vindictive, as dangerous. But I needed Warren alone. I needed him to see the evidence without her filter, without her practiced deflections and carefully rehearsed excuses. That afternoon, something interesting happened. Lumen called me with news from inside the building. Her voice was tight with barely suppressed excitement. "You need to hear this," she said. "The IT monitoring system flagged something unusual this morning. Cressida Moss Harlan, sitting at her computer, typing into Google." What was she searching for? How to restore legacy system access. Lumen paused for effect. And here's the best part. She accidentally emailed her search history to the company's IT monitoring inbox. I almost laughed. Almost. She's panicking. "She has no idea what she's doing," Lumen confirmed. "The systems are failing. Error messages are piling up. She doesn't know how to fix any of it because she doesn't have the knowledge or the training. She's been clicking buttons randomly, hoping something works." I thought about Cressida at my desk, her nervous eyes darting across screens filled with information she couldn't interpret. She had been installed in a position she couldn't perform, a figurehead placed there by nepotism and fraud. Now the facade was cracking. "Keep monitoring," I said. "Let me know if anything else comes through." That evening, I returned to my car in the employee parking garage. The concrete structure was cold and echo-prone, my footsteps bouncing off the walls like distant gunshots. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow pallor. Deirdre Moss was waiting for me. She was leaning against my driver's side door, her arms crossed, her face a careful mask of professional concern. She wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, buttoned tight against the garage chill. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a magazine cover, polished and predatory. "Ellison," she said. Her voice echoed in the empty garage. "We should talk." I stopped 10 feet away. I kept my hands visible, my posture neutral. "I have nothing to say to you." She smiled. It was the smile of a snake considering its prey. "I'm prepared to offer you a severance package. $200,000, no full NDA, mutual non-disparagement. You walk away clean, no investigation, no legal exposure, no messy public battles." "What am I not disparaging?" Her smile faltered, a crack in the mask. "You know how these things work, Eli. Perception matters. Image matters. Right now, the perception is that you're a disgruntled former employee who sabotaged critical systems. That's a criminal charge. Federal, prison time." I felt the cold settle into my bones. "I didn't sabotage anything." "I know that. You know that. But does a jury?" She took a step closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. "The company has resources, Eli. Lawyers, PR firms. We can make any narrative stick if we try hard enough. Or we can make this all go away. Take the money, disappear. This doesn't have to get ugly." I looked at her. I thought about the photograph, the trust document, the shell company with its convenient timing, all the lies stacked on top of lies, a tower of deception built on the bones of my career. "You're a dinosaur," Deirdre hissed, the mask finally cracking completely. Her eyes blazed with contempt. "Take the money and disappear. Go retire somewhere. Play with your grandchildren. Let the adults run the company." I shook my head slowly. "I've survived worse than you, Ms. Moss." I thought about Ruth in that hospital bed, fighting for every breath while machines beeped and doctors frowned. Regret is for people with something to lose. I walked past her to my car. She didn't try to stop me. I could feel her eyes on my back, burning with frustrated rage. When I pulled out of the garage, I checked my rearview mirror. The same no-plate car from the other night was 2 vehicles back. Dark windows, anonymous, patient. I drove home slowly, watching it follow. The second anonymous envelope arrived the next morning. Ruth found it tucked under our front door when she went to get the newspaper. Same expensive paper, same blocky handwriting, same careful attention to detail. Inside was a full copy of the trust document. Every page, every signature, every damning detail. Cressida Moss Harlan was listed as a 12% beneficial owner of company stock. The ownership had never been disclosed in any SEC filings. For a publicly traded company, that was a violation of federal securities law, the kind of violation that attracted investigators in dark suits carrying subpoenas. I called Lumen immediately. "This changes everything," she said. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "If we can prove this is authentic, we're not just talking about wrongful termination. We're talking about fraud on a federal level. SEC violations, criminal charges. This isn't just about your job anymore, Eli. This is about sending people to prison. Can you verify it?" "I'll need the original document." "But Eli, if this is real, Deirdre isn't just corrupt. She's committed a federal crime, multiple federal crimes. The SEC doesn't play around with undisclosed ownership stakes. They've destroyed bigger fish than her." I thought about the no-plate car, the hand-delivered envelopes, Oscar's silence that first morning, the way he couldn't meet my eyes. "Someone wants me to find this," I said. "Someone inside the company who knows what's happening but can't speak up directly." "Someone who's been watching and waiting for the right moment," Lumen agreed. "Someone who needs you to be the face of this fight because they can't be." I thought about Oscar Vang, the filed complaint that got buried, the whispered apology as he took my badge, the careful, quiet distance he maintained even as he fed me pieces of the puzzle. He was building a case, and he was using me as his weapon. That night, I sat in my workshop, looking at the framed cease and desist letter on the wall. Below it, I had pinned the trust document, the LLC paperwork, the photographs, the HR complaints, a wall of evidence, a map of corruption, a blueprint for destruction. Ruth came in with 2 cups of tea. She stood beside me, looking at the wall for a long time. The steam from the cups rose between us like incense. "How does it end?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm getting closer." She put her hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Just promise me you'll be careful. These people have already tried to destroy you once. They won't hesitate to try again." "They tried," I said. "They failed." My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered it, putting it on speaker so Ruth could hear. "Mr. Cade." A woman's voice. Professional. Unfamiliar, measured, and precise. "My name is Miri Stassen. I'm a consultant working with your former employer. I'd like to ask you some questions about the circumstances of your departure." I felt Ruth stiffen beside me. "I've been advised not to speak with company representatives." "I don't work for the company, Mr. Cade." A pause, heavy with implication. "I work for the Department of Labor." The silence stretched. Ruth's hand tightened on my shoulder. "I think we should meet," Miri Stassen said. The State Department of Labor field office was exactly what I expected. Gray walls the color of institutional despair, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly pallor. Rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs filled with people waiting to file claims, their faces drawn and weary. The air smelled of old coffee and quiet desperation. I found a seat in the waiting area and watched the clock on the wall tick away the minutes. Each second felt like an hour. Miri Stassen was not what I expected. She emerged from a side door and scanned the room until her eyes landed on me. She was in her early 50s, with short silver hair cropped close to her head and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a plain navy suit and no jewelry. Her face was unreadable, professional, the face of someone who had heard every lie and seen through every excuse. "Mr. Cade?" she asked, extending her hand. I stood and shook it. Her grip was firm and professional, the handshake of someone who meant business. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading me through a maze of cubicles to a small interview room in the back. The room was bare except for a metal table and 2 chairs. A single window looked out onto a parking lot. "I know this must be difficult." We sat across from each other at the metal table. She opened a folder in front of her. I recognized my own name on the tab, typed in neat black letters. "I've been reviewing your case," she said, her pen tapping against the folder. "The circumstances of your termination are unusual. That's one word for it." She smiled slightly, a crack in the professional facade. "I've also been reviewing the company's recent filings, their organizational structure, their personnel decisions." She looked up at me, her eyes sharp and searching. "Would you be willing to share any documentation you've collected?" I hesitated. The folder in my bag felt heavy, weighted with secrets and accusations. "How do I know this isn't going to end up back at the company? How do I know you're not just another corporate cleanup crew?" "You don't," she admitted. Her honesty was disarming. "But I can tell you that my office has been monitoring this company for 6 months. Your termination wasn't random, Mr. Cade. It was part of a pattern we've been tracking." She pulled out several documents from her folder, complaints from other employees I didn't recognize, irregularities in hiring practices, financial discrepancies that made my head spin. "You're not the first person Deirdre Moss has targeted," Miri said, her voice dropping. "You're just the first one who fought back." Something shifted in my chest. I had felt so alone in this fight, so isolated. To learn that others had walked this path before me, that there was a trail of victims stretching back months or years, was both vindicating and horrifying. I reached into my bag. I pulled out copies of everything I had collected. The LLC paperwork showing Cressida's fabricated employment history, the trust document revealing her hidden stock ownership, the HR complaints Lumen had given me, the photographs. Miri went through each item slowly, methodically. Her questions were precise. Too precise. She knew things she shouldn't know. She asked about details I hadn't mentioned, connections I hadn't made. "You've been investigating longer than 6 months," I said finally. It wasn't a question. She looked at me for a long moment. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. Then she smiled again, a real smile this time. "Let's just say your former employer has attracted attention from multiple agencies," she said. "You're not the only person building a case, Mr. Cade. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they turn." I understood then. This wasn't just a wrongful termination complaint. This wasn't just about my job or my reputation. This was a federal investigation, and I had just become a witness in something much larger than myself. That afternoon, I met Lumen at her office one last time. The HR wing was quiet, most employees gone for the day. She had prepared a binder, thick and heavy with documents. "Everything is organized," she said, pointing to different sections as she flipped through the pages. Oscar's complaint about Cressida, the payroll records showing she was paid for 3 months before her official start date, the HR violations, the buried complaints. It's all here, documented and dated. "Will you testify?" I asked. The question hung in the air between us. She hesitated. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards. Then she nodded slowly. "I already did," she said quietly. "Miri Stassen isn't just a consultant. She's been building this case for months. I've been cooperating with her investigation since January." I stared at her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You knew? All this time you knew?" "I couldn't tell you, Eli. It would have compromised the investigation. There are protocols, procedures. If word got out that I was cooperating, Deirdre would have had me fired, or worse." She met my eyes, her gaze steady. "But I made sure you had what you needed. The documents, the connections. I made sure you weren't alone in this fight." I thought about the anonymous envelopes, the hand-delivered documents. I had assumed they were all from Oscar, but some of them must have come from Lumen, filtered through channels I couldn't trace. "Thank you," I said. The words felt inadequate for the debt I owed her. She shook her head. "Don't thank me yet. The hard part is tomorrow." That night, I went back to the office building. Not officially, not through the front door with its gleaming turnstiles and security cameras. I used my old badge, which was still active because someone in IT hadn't processed my termination properly, careless oversight, or maybe intentional sabotage from a sympathetic soul. The server room in the sub-basement was cold and humming with electronic life. I knew this room better than anyone alive. I had designed half the systems that lived here, nursed them through crashes and upgrades and the occasional catastrophic failure. I found the fail-safe configuration panel, the manual authentication system that only I knew existed. It wasn't unauthorized code. It was standard system architecture, documented in the original build specifications from 15 years ago. A safety measure I had implemented to protect the company from exactly the kind of chaos that had erupted when I was fired. I photographed everything: the panel, the documentation, the maintenance logs that proved it had been part of the system since day one, evidence that I hadn't sabotaged anything, evidence that my termination was based on lies. As I turned to leave, I heard footsteps echoing in the corridor. Oscar Vang emerged from the shadows. He was in his security uniform, his face unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. His hand rested casually on his belt, near the radio that could summon backup in seconds. We stood in silence for a long moment. The servers hummed around us, oblivious to the human drama unfolding in their midst. "I saw you," he said finally. His voice was low, careful. "On the cameras. I'm not going to stop you." I nodded. I started to walk past him, toward the exit. "Mr. Cade." I stopped. His voice had changed, carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "They made me erase the garage camera footage from your firing day. The footage of Deirdre handing Cressida your badge before the paperwork was even signed." I turned to look at him. His face was still unreadable, but his eyes held something new. Determination, maybe, or guilt finally finding its voice. "I kept a copy," he said. The words hung in the air between us. Evidence of premeditation, evidence that my termination was planned before any justification existed, evidence that could bring down everything they had built on lies. "Why?" I asked. Oscar was quiet for a moment. "Because some things are wrong, and some debts need to be paid." The next morning, Warren Teague's assistant called. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, but I detected a note of something underneath. Anticipation, maybe, or fear. "Mr. Teague has added you to the agenda. Please bring all relevant documentation." I hung up the phone. I looked at Ruth. She was standing in the doorway of the workshop, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of worry and fierce pride. "This is it," I said. She nodded. "This is it." I picked up the binder Lumen had prepared. I added Oscar's footage. I added the server room photographs. I added every piece of evidence I had collected over the past week. 23 years of building systems, of solving problems, of showing up early and staying late, of giving everything I had to a company that had tried to throw me away like garbage. It all came down to this. One meeting, one chance to tell the truth. Ruth walked over to me. She put her hands on my shoulders and looked into my eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "I'm proud of you. You didn't give up. You didn't let them win." I pulled her close and held her. I breathed in the familiar scent of her hair, felt the warmth of her body against mine. "I couldn't have done this without you," I said. She pulled back and smiled. "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk in the workshop, reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, every thread of the case I had built. The wall behind me was covered with pinned papers, a constellation of corruption that would either save me or destroy me. Outside the window, the stars were hidden behind clouds, but somewhere beyond them, dawn was coming. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The board conference room on the 21st floor had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. The table was an oval of polished mahogany, surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than my monthly salary. Video screens lined the walls, their dark surfaces reflecting the morning light. Everything was being recorded. I could feel the weight of the cameras, the microphones, the documentation that would preserve this moment for eternity. When I walked through the double doors at 9:03 a.m., Deirdre Moss was mid-sentence. "And Mr. Cade's unauthorized code caused the system outage. We have documentation proving that he installed a termination trigger designed to sabotage operations if he was ever removed from his position. This was premeditated sabotage by a disgruntled employee who—" Warren Teague raised his hand. The room went silent. The gesture was small, but the authority behind it was absolute. "Mr. Cade," Warren said. His voice was calm, measured. "You have the floor." I walked to the end of the table, opposite the board members. I set down my binder. I didn't sit. I wanted them to see me standing. I wanted them to see the man who had built the systems they depended on, the man they had tried to throw away. Deirdre's face was a mask of controlled fury. Her jaw was tight, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. Cressida sat beside her, pale and trembling, her hands clutched together in her lap. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The confident young woman who had taken my workstation was gone, replaced by someone who knew she was drowning. "I'll start with the failsafe," I said. My voice was steady. 23 years of professionalism had prepared me for this moment. I pulled out the photographs from the server room. I explained the manual authentication system in detail, walking the board through the technical specifications, the documentation, the approval process from 15 years ago. "It's not unauthorized code," I said, laying each photograph on the table like cards in a winning hand. "It's documented, approved infrastructure. It's been part of the system architecture since 2009. The reason Cressida couldn't perform the handshake is because in 23 years, no one else was ever trained to do it. That's a management failure, not mine. A board member leaned forward, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes. Why were you the only one who knew this procedure, Mr. Cade? Because I asked for training resources repeatedly. Those requests were denied. I looked directly at Deirdre. By Ms. Moss's predecessor and by Ms. Moss herself. I have the emails, I have the budget proposals, I have the denial memos, all documented, all time-stamped. I pulled out the next stack of documents, the LLC paperwork from the county clerk's office. Cressida Moss Harlan's resume lists previous employment at Harlan Technical Consulting, LLC. That company was registered 1 week before she was hired and dissolved 1 week after. It's a shell company created specifically to fabricate her employment history. Murmurs rippled around the table. Board members exchanged glances. Deirdre opened her mouth to interrupt, but Warren silenced her with a look that could have frozen fire. I pulled out the trust document, the blue leather-bound pages that Oscar had slipped under my door. This is the Moss Family Trust. Page 7 lists Cressida Moss Harlan as a 12% beneficial owner of company stock. This ownership was never disclosed in any SEC filings. For a publicly traded company, that's a federal securities violation. The board counsel leaned forward, his face draining of color. Where did you get this document? It was provided to me anonymously. I verified its authenticity through public records and independent legal review. The trust was established 15 years ago. The beneficial ownership has never been reported. I pulled out Oscar's garage footage. I connected the USB drive to the conference room's display system. The screen flickered to life. This is security camera footage from the morning I was terminated. It shows Deirdre Moss handing Cressida my workstation badge before any termination paperwork was signed. It proves the decision to fire me and replace me with her niece was made in advance. It was premeditated, it was planned, and it was designed to install an unqualified family member in a critical position while eliminating the only person who could expose the fraud. The video played. The room was silent. Everyone watched Deirdre hand the badge to Cressida in the parking garage, both of them smiling, unaware they were being recorded. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner of the frame. 2 hours before my termination meeting. Warren Teague's face was granite. His eyes moved from the screen to Deirdre, and in that gaze I saw the end of her career. Ms. Moss, he said quietly, is this your signature on the hire authorization for Cressida? Deirdre hesitated. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, looking for escape, looking for any lifeline she could grasp, finding none. Answer the question, Warren said. His voice was ice. The door opened. Miri Stassen walked in. She wasn't alone. 2 men in blue windbreakers followed her through the doorway. The letters on their backs were yellow and bold. FBI. Behind them, 2 more agents in suits, their badges visible on their belts. I apologize for the interruption, Miri said. She held up credentials, a gold badge catching the light. Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General. We have an ongoing investigation into this company's employment practices, securities violations, and potential fraud. Deirdre stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. This is outrageous. You can't just barge into a private board meeting. We have attorneys. We have rights. This is... Ms. Moss, Miri said calmly, cutting through her protests like a knife through paper. You and Ms. Moss Harlan are requested for immediate interviews. Your counsel should be present. All company records are to be preserved pending our investigation. Any attempt to destroy, alter, or conceal documents will be treated as obstruction of justice. The room erupted, board members talking over each other, voices rising in alarm and confusion. The company counsel frantically typing on his laptop, security personnel appearing at the doors, unsure whose orders to follow. But I didn't hear any of it. I was watching Deirdre's face, watching the color drain from her skin like water from a broken vessel, watching her realize that everything she had built on lies and manipulation was collapsing around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. One of the FBI agents approached her. Ma'am, please come with us. She turned to Warren, desperation cracking through her professional mask. This is a mistake. He's the criminal. He sabotaged the systems. He's been planning this revenge for weeks. The investigation will determine that, Miri interrupted smoothly. For now, you need to come with us. They led her out. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just walked, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her back still straight with the remnants of her dignity. But her hands were shaking. I could see them trembling at her sides. Cressida was crying. The mascara ran down her cheeks in black rivers, just like it had on the day I was fired. The confident facade had shattered completely. She told me it was fine. she sobbed as they escorted her toward the door. She said no one would check. She said it was all arranged. She said it was family helping family. I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was signing. The door closed behind them. The room was quiet. Warren Teague walked over to me. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Tired. The weight of what had happened under his watch was visible in every line of his face, in the slump of his shoulders, in the grief behind his eyes. "You could have burned this place down," he said quietly. "You had everything you needed to destroy us. The SEC violations alone would have tanked the stock price. The fraud charges would have triggered a shareholder lawsuit. You could have taken us apart." I looked at the binder on the table. 23 years of work. 23 years of loyalty. 23 years of showing up early and staying late and solving problems that no one else could solve. "I built this place," I said. "I built the systems. I trained the people. I solved the problems that kept everyone else awake at night. I didn't want to destroy it. I just wanted the people who tried to steal it to face what they did." Warren nodded slowly. He extended his hand. "We'd like you to come back, Eli. Full reinstatement. Back pay for the entire period of your termination. Whatever title you want. Name your terms." I thought about it. I thought about the early mornings, the coffee in the break room, the satisfaction of watching a system run smoothly. I thought about the late nights debugging code, the camaraderie with colleagues who understood what we were building. I thought about the systems I had designed with my own hands. Then I thought about Ruth, about the cancer she had survived, about the cease and desist letter framed on my workshop wall, about the way Deirdre had offered me $200,000 to disappear, like I was a problem to be solved with money. "I'll consult," I said finally, "on my terms, at my rates, but I won't work for someone who forgot what I built. I won't pretend the last 2 weeks didn't happen." Warren didn't argue. He just nodded, accepting my terms. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, apologetic. Then I walked out of the conference room, down the elevator, through the lobby. Oscar was at the security desk. He looked up as I approached. Our eyes met. Something passed between us, an acknowledgement of debts paid, of risks taken, of justice finally served. I nodded. He nodded back. I stepped out into the morning light. The sun was warm on my face. The city hummed around me, traffic flowing, people hurrying to their offices, the world continuing its endless rotation. My phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. "How did it go?" I typed back. "They're done. Coming home now." I pocketed my phone. I started walking toward the parking garage where my car waited. Behind me, the building gleamed in the sunlight. 23 years of my life in there. 23 years of building something that others tried to steal. They had failed. I had won. Not because I was richer, not because I was more powerful, but because I had documented everything. Because I had been patient. Because I had trusted the truth to matter more than lies. Ruth was waiting for me when I got home. She was standing in the doorway of my workshop, looking at the wall where I had pinned all the evidence. The cease and desist letter in its frame, the photographs, the documents, the map of corruption that had guided me through the darkness. "It's over?" she asked. "It's over," I said. She walked to me. She put her arms around me. I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at the wall, at the evidence that had saved me, at the proof that patience and documentation could defeat arrogance and fraud. "Now," I said, "we take down that wall. We frame the cease and desist letter properly, and we move on." She laughed. It was a good sound, a healing sound. "Keep the letter," she said. "It's a trophy." I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I genuinely smiled. Outside, the sun was shining. The birds were singing. The world was exactly as it had been before all of this started. But I was different. I had learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones sitting in the corner office. Deirdre and Cressida thought power came from titles and connections. They mistook my silence for weakness and my methodical nature for slowness. They were wrong. True power isn't about how fast you can act. It's about how thoroughly you can document. It's about patience. It's about waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. I walked into my workshop. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. There was consulting work to do. Systems to fix. Problems to solve. The dinosaur was still breathing, and he had learned some new tricks.